who should get to play women's sports in Kansas? A fight that includes charges of unfairness and bullying. Plus, should your boss be able to require you to get the COVID vaccine? And how much is too much lost to fraud from the Kansas unemployment system? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. One of the biggest headlines this week, the hundreds of millions of dollars the Kansas unemployment system has lost to fraud, and a fight over the cause. We begin today with Rebecca Chung from the KSN Capitol Bureau.
State auditors predict $600 million in fraudulent claims were paid out last year. Just recently, the state's Labor Department predicting $290 million in fraud payments. Now the state's Labor Department is demanding auditors retract the report. State auditors estimate the Department of Labor paid out $600 million in fraudulent claims in 2020. That's about $200 million in fraud in state funds and $400 million in fraud in federal funds. But the state's Labor Department doesn't agree with the report, calling it seriously flawed. The audit is now stirring controversy among lawmakers. Some say updates to the state's outdated computer system would have helped the state's Labor Department field fraud, and that the state should focus on a solution moving forward.
We've been better prepared to address with the frauds had we had a system in place that was already modernized, that we could just do a plug and play.
But other lawmakers say fraud is not the only problem, and they're tired of the excuses.
We have people that are contacting us every day in the legislature, dozens every day, that will say, I'm calling all day long, and they cannot get through. Something's wrong. It's not just the fraud aspect, it's the whole Department of Labor.
Now the governor says she's ordering an external audit of fraud payments in the Department of Labor. At the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
And joining me this week to discuss this and other topics, we have Adam Strunk, managing editor of the Newton Now, who is joining us by Zoom. And on the desk with me, Diane Leffler from the Wichita Eagle. Thank you both so much. And Diane, I'm going to start with you. You and I were both in that hearing where this report was presented. What was your biggest takeaway from that presentation?
Well, I think my biggest takeaway was I don't think anybody really has a handle on this yet. Whatever number we arrive at, it's going to be too much. And the fraud in this situation is obviously just rampant. There are different kinds of fraud than the State Department of Labor is used to dealing with. That's another problem. Mm-hmm. There were problems with the federal funds that they received where they weren't allowed to ask the usual questions that they do to try to weed out the fraud. I myself have gotten notices, I'm sure many of your viewers have too, saying that, you know, my unemployment claim was approved. Well, I haven't been out of work since the beginning of the pandemic. So, you know, there's just a whole lot of problems here, and I don't really think any of them have a handle on it yet.
Yeah, a lot of confusion there. And we were talking before the show started, Adam, you had a lot of questions as well, perhaps some things that your readers really interested in, especially looking at how this report was figured out, how they came to this number.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, when you're reading through stuff, you see a lot of possiblies, likelies, could be's. And I mean, it's exactly what Diane said. Like, I don't think anyone really has a good idea of it right now. It's just such a complex issue. It's nice to have some kind of context with it, which I don't know if Diane, like you've been covering the legislature for a long while. How much of a role do you think the outdated system has played in it? Have those conversations come up in years past about needing to update those systems?
Yeah, it was they've talked about updating those systems for many years, and there was actually a program to do that, but that program was, well, during, you know, budget shortfalls of the past, that program was kind of allowed to peter out without getting it all done. I think more computers would have helped in this situation, or better computers would have helped in this situation. I'm not sure that they would have helped as much as maybe some people are thinking they would, because it wasn't so much a question, at least to me, of you know, the calculations. It was a question of being inundated with fraudulent claims and wanting to get the money to the people who have legitimate claims as quickly as possible, because they were really hurting. And that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the forgotten.
Yeah.
The
In some ways, it could almost be argued that the antiquated system helped save the state money because they weren't able to get to all of these claims, and so maybe didn't pay out as much as they would have if they'd had an updated system and things were going through lickety-split.
Yeah.
So.
And you know, I mean, maybe maybe the time has come to get out, like, paper and pencil and some ledger books and start working on this, because there's a whole lot of people that are waiting for benefits, and there's a whole lot of people who are getting benefits who have absolutely no legitimate claim on them.
Yeah, and I've definitely talked to folks like that. I'm sure you have too, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our school districts, everyone's been just getting nailed. And I mean, that's a time commitment for employers too. We've had to work it out even at our own paper, like people filing claim after claim on various employees we still have. And like, that takes time to go through the books, to make the calls, to do all that. And so it's a strain on not just the system, it's a strain on employers. And obviously it's a strain on all of the people who continue to not be able to get benefits, which we hear from quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, this is certainly a morass that we have been discussing almost every week on the show, and I'm sure we're not done with it yet.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick up a couple of other topics. Another debate going on in the Kansas Senate this week, whether your boss should be able to order you to get the COVID vaccine. Kansas Reflector reports Senator Mark Steffen called on fellow senators Thursday to support his bill that would ban employers from requiring workers to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Under the bill, any company that punished employees for not getting vaccinated would face a $1,000 fine. Steffen, a board-certified anesthesiologist, faced off against family medical practitioner, doctor, and representative John Epley, as well as a survivor of bacterial meningitis. Epley said, "I'm really questioning why we would do that. It really concerns me. And why would government in this case preempt business decisions?" Steffen argued they call it a novel virus. It's a novel vaccination. We need to be very cognizant of that. Watch as the opponents come up and talk about taking care of a society and their willingness to sacrifice individuals in the process. That's not their decision to make. It's our decision as an individual. And really pitting the individual against businesses, it seems kind of like a familiar argument there, Adam.
Well, I'm just struck by the incredible irony of that situation, talking about people being willing to sacrifice the individual for the betterment of society when we have 500,000 people who've died of COVID. And a lot of that has been driven by our willingness to sacrifice the individual so we can keep businesses and society running. But no, it's an interesting argument. I don't know if it's where it's going. You guys would have a better idea of me than that.
Yeah, we did actually, just before we began recording the show, take a look, and that bill has not made it out of committee, which at this point, because the committee it's in, means it's most likely dead.
Yeah, probably. Obviously nothing's ever dead under the dome, but
that is true.
But yeah, I mean, this is one where you can kind of see both sides of it. It's a very hard. It's a very hard thing to order someone to get a medication if they don't want to take that medication. On the other hand, you have other employees who need to be protected. But if your employees who want the shot can get the shot, and that seems to be the big hurdle right now.
Yeah.
Is that, I think there was a Sedgwick County survey, and 65% of us want to get the shot. Another 19 were sort of on the fence, and then the rest were, I think it was 16% were against getting their vaccination.
And that really does mirror the national numbers as far as how many people plan to get the vaccine.
Yeah. So, once everybody can get the vaccine, I'm not sure that it would be worthwhile to try to force it onto other people. If they want to get sick, that's their, that's their call, as long as they're not infecting the people who do want to, to be safe from this disease.
Although another part of that, Adam, really is, I've read a lot of reports, I'm sure you have too, that 65% getting the vaccine, that kind of falls short of what's needed for herd immunity, which a lot of folks say is what we need to get back to normal.
Yeah, and again, those are moving targets too. I've heard 80% herd immunity. I've heard 65. I read a piece in the Wall Street Journal arguing that we're getting closer to it by the end of May, because there's been so many people that are infected. I don't know if we have still a great idea of what that herd immunity is, But on that point, that once we have it available, let people make their own decision. I get that. I feel that way too. But I bet there's some employers, I bet nursing homes, I bet some hospitals, I bet some doctors' offices would really like that ability to make their own decisions on how they run their business and what they require from employees. Like, our state has a precedent of supporting employers requiring all sorts of other medical things from employees, like you have to submit to drug tests. They tried to protect that in the medical marijuana debate. So I don't think it's out of line. But that being said, it does feel I don't know. You're right. There's both sides on this thing.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that kind of, to a certain extent, mirrors the ongoing argument over whether the government can require people to be vaccinated at all.
Well, yeah, and I think it's pretty clear the government can't require people to do this. But it gets really. It's a gray area there when you're talking about businesses. I just have a problem with telling people that they have to take a medicine.
Wow.
That seems to me to be kind of, it's your call as long as you're not hurting anybody else. If you want to jump your motorcycle over the Snake River Canyon, I'll say nice things about you at your funeral. But I don't want to see you do it with a busload of school kids.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the rub on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of folks right now are trying to figure out. And yeah, it may be an argument we continue to hear for quite some time, because it does appear that this vaccine may well end up being seasonal, kind of like the flu vaccine.
Yeah, it could be. We know we're going to be dealing with this pandemic for a number of years. This isn't going away, but it is something that we're just going to have to stay on top of it.
No.
If there's another vaccine that's needed, will they, how long it'll take to get that to us? So it's, I'd really like to see them spend their time and effort right now on vaccine availability and getting the shots into people's arms who want the shots. And I was just at the vaccine clinic here in Sedgwick County a few minutes ago, where Roger Marshall, the senator, was speaking, and it's.
And on that, I actually struggled a little bit trying to get my mom registered for her second dose. Got the first dose, no problem, and then we reached that 3-week point where she was supposed to sign up for the second, and there were no appointments. Nothing available. It was, so she was supposed to get it next week, and now not until the week after. Right. She has to wait 4 weeks because there just aren't enough doses out there.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, supporters of medical marijuana traveled to Topeka this week to argue for legalizing the drug, another big debate.
Unfortunately, suffers from a rare, relentless seizure monster. Oh, hang on a minute, sorry.
Kylie Klug had to stop talking at one point to help her son as he had a seizure, the very reason she was in the room. Despite the pandemic, she and other Kansans came from across the state Wednesday to share their stories of the difference medicinal use of marijuana has made in their lives.
He's been able to get off of 100% of his seizure pills.
She says her son is now using CBD oil with up to 5% THC in it, which Claire and Lola's law has allowed for the last year and a half in Kansas. She'd like to see that expanded.
It's just like a light went off, and he's bright-eyed, and he laughs when his brothers get in trouble, and he's in there again.
For Martin Barlow, medical marijuana has helped him deal with debilitating PTSD symptoms.
When I'm just going about my daily life, I'll have flashbacks or panic attacks. PTSD is something that I can't deal with on my own. I have looked for outside help for 16 years. Cannabis is the thing that works.
The bill they support would allow the growth, distribution, and use of medical marijuana only by those who register with the state and limit patients to a 90-day supply. Anyone trying to fake their way into getting the marijuana would face fines. The state estimates this plan would bring in about $1.4 million in new taxes in the first year alone. But for these supporters, it's not about the money, but wanting others to see the benefits they have.
Everyone knows someone who could benefit from this bill.
And on Thursday, opponents told lawmakers there are gray areas in the bill when it comes to enforcement, especially for things like DUIs. They also question just how effective marijuana is as a medicine. Now, to clarify a little bit, Claire and Lola's law does not actually legalize any form of marijuana in Kansas. It's what's called an affirmative defense if you happen to be stopped and you have it and you have this letter from your doctor that says you need it. And really, that was kind of a pretzel twist to get around the current laws in Kansas and allow a certain segment of the population to use THC-enhanced CBD oils.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at marijuana use in America right now, most states, almost all states, allow medical. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 3 or now 2, but
I think it's 3.
But with when you're talking about, almost all states allow medical marijuana, and a growing number of states are allowing it for recreational purposes. And I have not heard of the social order breaking down in any of those states.
No.
I lost both my parents to cancer, and during the final days of their life, they were given medicines that were way stronger, way worse. I mean, they were given heroin derivatives, so it's like, I guess I just don't understand that, I mean, if you ever saw somebody that you love go through that and you knew that this is something that could, maybe, I mean, marijuana does 2 things. One, it kills pain, and the other, it makes you hungry. And if you're a cancer patient, those are both, those are the 2 things that you have to worry about the most. And I don't understand. I mean, I would need more, I would need more to be explained as to why this bill is opposed. It just, I mean, I understand you don't want kids to have it. I understand you don't want to make it too easy to get to, but it just strikes me as kind of cruel to tell people who are terminally ill that they can't have this if it gives them relief.
No. Well, and you're certainly not alone in that. A growing number of Americans and Kansans are supporting legalized marijuana. The most recent Kansas Speaks survey, I think the number was 65%. And Adam, that seems to be statewide growing support for this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, I think something for people to take in mind is statistically, like, some of these people are going to be in that position where Dion has found himself in, or where I found myself in, like watching my mom go through pancreatic cancer. It's an absolute feeling of helplessness where you're watching them be pumped full of opioids just to get through the pain, and you're waiting for those few minutes of lucidity from when the painkillers wear off and when the pain doesn't hit. And you think that, like, maybe there's something that gives a person 1 more meal or like 5 more minutes of a conversation. And when you're at the end of life, like, that's a big deal. And it feels, you said exactly right, Dion, it feels cruel. It feels cruel, and maybe those people who are opposed to it don't understand that or haven't felt that. But I think that yeah, I would have a hard time hearing an argument that I would agree with why people with terminal illness shouldn't be provided medical marijuana if it's an option.
And the governor has supported legalizing medical marijuana, hoping to use the money to expand Medicaid in Kansas. There's a group, Kansas Nurses for Medical Cannabis, and they say that $1.4 million in the first year that is estimated in the bill would be raised in sales taxes is probably way low. They say Oklahoma in their first year of legalized medical marijuana, $25 million influx in revenues.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot higher than that. And part of the problem here is that it's gotten linked to expanded Medicaid. There's a lot of opposition in the legislature to expanding Medicaid that may not be there for medical marijuana. No. So if it may have been a tactical error if you want medical marijuana to try to link those 2 things together, because I know that
there's very strong opposition.
There's some lawmakers who who might be convincible on one thing but not the other.
Yep.
So
yeah. Well, what we do know is this bill, not necessarily dead. It's in a committee that is so-called blessed, right. Which means that they don't have to kick the bills out by the end of this week,
right,
for them to stay alive.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to keep watching it and see what happens.
Yep, I'm sure we'll be talking about it again.
I have no doubt. It's not the first time we've talked about it. Yeah. Should Kansas schools confine girls and women's sports to those who are born female? That's another debate that some lawmakers were discussing this week. It's a bill that had supporters and opponents lining up to speak. A warning, some people may find some of these statements triggering. Transgender athletes ban would require publicly funded K-12 schools, colleges, and universities to allow only biological girls and women to play women's sports, banning transgender girls. Supporters say the measure is about fairness to the athletes and protecting the opportunities that school sports bring to young women.
There are indisputable, scientifically proven hormonal, chromosomal, and physiological advantages that males have over females, which create an unequal playing field.
I worked incredibly hard to develop my basketball skills. When I competed against other girls in middle school and high school, I dominated. But no matter how sophisticated my skills became, I could never overcome the superior size, strength, and speed of the male athletes at the YMCA.
Opponents disputed the idea women and girls can't compete with men and boys and called the bill an attack on transgender children.
Girls are are competing on high school and middle school wrestling teams against boys and winning matches. Now girls are breaking into college football. Women are proving every day they can compete with men. Why do we continue to think of them as the weaker sex? They're tough.
Transgender students in my classroom and in classrooms across our state are scared. They already face extreme hostilities within our communities and schools. Proposals like the one before us today intensify these hostilities and magnify their negative effects on transgender students. I'm tired of standing at the candlelight vigils. I'm tired of burying trans kids. Why aren't you?
Now, the KNEA, the teachers union, said that they felt this most likely really belonged in Keisha's province. And this certainly is an issue, Adam, that a lot of schools have struggled with over the last few years as they try to figure out how to help all students.
Well, and again, this was reported in the Emporia Gazette. I believe there were currently 5 transgender students in middle or high school right now competing in activities. So to me, it just seems like an issue, or it seems like a bill in search of a problem. I mean, to me personally, I don't understand what the problem is of allowing kids to compete in a sport their gender identifies in. I mean, as the state of Kansas, we're required to provide an equitable education environment. If this is an environment that allows these kids to participate in athletic activities without maybe being bullied, without dealing with some of the other issues they might deal with otherwise, I think that's an equitable education. I'm not hearing about it a whole lot where I'm at. I'm hearing a lot about people being worried about the state budget, or people being worried about Department of Labor fraud, or people worried about natural gas bills. I'm hearing a lot about that. Right now, I am not hearing a whole lot about people calling in worried that there's going to be a transgender boy or girl playing in a sport.
Yeah, and a promise that if this bill moved forward, which it does not look like it will at this point, there would immediately be a lawsuit from the ACLU on this.
Oh yeah, I mean and the Equality Act is moving through Congress even as we speak. Mm-hmm. So it's, I tend to agree with Adam. I think it just, little known fact, transgender athletes have been allowed to participate in the Olympic Games since 2008. Not one has yet even made an Olympic team, much less won a medal. Wow. Generally, people who are transgender, particularly from male to female, mm-hmm. They are taking hormones, they're taking, testosterone blockers and those kinds of things, yeah. And that does tend to level the playing field a little bit. So it's, I understand, there've been some bike races won by transgender athletes internationally, yeah. But as far as nobody's going to remember. In 15 years, nobody's going to remember who won the wrestling match mm-hmm. in, a high school competition anyway. Yeah. So it's like, it just doesn't. No.
Well, and it definitely does look at this point like this issue isn't going any further, but it seems to come up every year, and that's what really has upset some folks. Yeah. Now, finally today, the effort to save a Wichita landmark moved to a new venue this week at the State House, but it didn't get a very warm reception.
I feel like I'm trapped in a custody dispute.
Tear them down or keep using them. The debate over the future of Century 2 and the old public library building had a handful of Wichitans heading to Topeka Wednesday asking for state lawmakers' help.
We presented the opinion of Wichita citizens who really do love both buildings.
The leaders of the movement to save the buildings asked state lawmakers to make the city of Wichita hold a public vote that the city council would have to follow before it can lease out or tear down either of the buildings.
Please let the voters decide the fate of two iconic municipally owned building landmarks in Wichita by passing House Bill 2233.
But several groups worried that would violate the city's right to local control.
This is kind of a family food fight. This is a local matter that ought to be decided at the local level. That's how our system of government works.
City leaders pointed out no decision has been made just yet.
The Wichita City Council has not even received the official riverfront plan right now. We've always committed to a public vote.
But Century 2 lovers fear that the council will ignore any public vote that doesn't include a sales tax proposal to finance riverfront development plans. Lawmakers seem to agree with the city, even when they too love the building.
I love Century 2. I love what we've done there. I'm really concerned that we're stepping in somewhere, and I really don't want to be in custody disputes throughout the state.
In my opinion, we probably shouldn't even be hearing this.
And Diane, you and I both were in this hearing. It was pretty clear when we walked out, this bill's not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think it's a dead bill. I think that, I understand what they're saying about local control, but there is a flaw that this whole situation is exposed, and that's that the initiative process for local measures is broken. Mm-hmm. And the people can't get things like this on the ballot through their own efforts, despite this group having gathered over 17,000 signatures when they needed 12,000 to get an initiative. Mm-hmm. And the first thing the city did was take them to court and get the initiative thrown out because it's an administrative matter rather than a legislative matter. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, if you're a person who's about democracy, that's about as direct as it gets. And the other thing that I see in this is that, when the city has control of what the ballot question is, they can write a ballot question to, get the votes that they want to get. Uh-huh. And the third thing is, for these city council members to be saying, well, it hasn't even been presented to us yet. They've been involved in it from the get-go. $100,000 worth of city money went to the plan to tear it down. $100,000 went from the county, and even the, quote, private partners are publicly supported, including the city's tourism bureau and the city's economic development agency.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. Diane, we're out of time. Thank you so much, and you as well, Adam, for joining us. I would also like to thank our news partners at Cake News, the Wichita Eagle, and KSN News for sharing their materials with us. We'd love to hear what you think on these topics or on ideas for future shows. Just drop us an email at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, stay safe and have a great week.